Fowler Outdoors here. Today we'll be mounting a VX5HD 3x15x44 30mm Leupold scope onto a modified Remington 730-06. Getting ready for a New Mexico elk hunt. Chris Fowler Outdoors, stay tuned. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is mount our bases. I have Leupold bases. Got off Amazon. We'll include a link to these. But I suggest Leupold has a great little program. You can go to their website and put in your rifle and your make and all, and they'll tell you what scope rings are available for your rifle. There's other rings out there, but anyway, we chose Leupold for this rifle. So this is a 700, Remington 700, but my son has modified it. He's put a different stock, and so he's chose to carry this out to his New Mexico elk hunt. The first part is we're going to take our bases. I've set these on here, and we're going to mount our bases to the 700. Then we're going to take our rings and place those on. Then we're going to take our Wheeler lapping kit. We have a 30mm barrel on our scope, and we're going to check the alignment on the rings. Then we're going to lap the scope. Then we'll laser align it and pretty much go through the whole deal with you. This will be a little longer video than we normally do, but anyway, I want to give you all the points that'll help give you the most confidence in making your shot. Okay, for our bases, we have our Leupold bases here, and we've placed those on. We've hand started the screws into it. 22 pounds is what they recommend, and also their recommendation is no additional Loctite on this assembly. So we'll torque those down to 22 pounds. You hear the torque gauge go off. We'll do the front as well. And now we're done. Next step will be place the bottom rings and secure them on to the bases. 25 pounds of torque on these. So the first step will be taking the top rings off of the scope mount and loosening the screws that'll attach it to the base. All right, we get the top ring removed. Now we'll need to loosen, you can see that, loosen the screws that'll attach to the base plate. The bases that we have 2 slots for the rings. So we're going to put it in the furthest one. Just hand tighten it a little, put the back one on, and check our scope, make sure we got room for our turret and our eye relief is good before we pick which one we'll use. Special note here on these rings, when you're tightening those to the base, very important tip given by Leupold or any is you keep pressure on the ring itself, pushing toward the muzzle end. You don't want to leave any gaps, so when the rifle goes off, the gun's going to move back, the scope and mount's going to want to stay where it's at. So you want to make sure you apply pressure towards the muzzle end as you're tightening up these bases. Now we may move this one, but I want to bring that very special point they make in their mounting instructions. Now we'll do the same with the rear base. There is no difference, so you make one in the front, one in the back. We haven't made or posted any videos in a while. We've changed jobs a couple of times and back into business for ourselves now. The Lord's really blessed us, and we've got a shop, and we've got to get some range time in on this rifle, so we want to get the scope on and just wanted to make a little video just how to mount a scope. We're going to laser level it, we're going to bore sight it and take it to the range. We got the top mount off. We loosen the screws for the mounting to the base. If you can see, this little ring, it's just a little wedge that goes on the side, and it's got a slot in the bottom. And that's what gives you great stability on these mounts. Same procedure as the front one. We apply pressure, pointing the base toward the muzzle, and we'll hand tighten and then set our scope on there and check our eye relief and our turret. So here is the scope we've purchased for the rifle. A VX 5HD. Awesome. It is a 3x15 44 millimeter on the end, 30 millimeter tube. Just a awesome clear scope. Looking for great things with this. I want to show you something with the camera here on the scope, and on the scope here, if you can see, there's very little room from where the scope begins to transition from the 30 millimeter tube out to the end, which is 44 millimeters. And you look at the back, and that is on the 700 if you place it in the forward slot. So that tells me we need to move this ring back to this slot here. I don't want to crimp at all, be inside that area, and I want to have plenty of room so that this dial is not scrubbing against the mount. That just looks too close to me. We're going to back up, put it here, and move forward with the installation. For these screws is 25 pounds. We'll set that on our torque. The next process is we want to check our alignment with our rings. Okay, we've placed the alignment tools in the rings to check the alignment, and but I'm going to take the camera and I'm going to show you what the difference is. And you want to have this nearly touching and let the 2 points be halfway between the rings. So, horizontal, you can see that they are pretty close. Let's get a little something to, pretty close there. But looking above, you can see that they're just a little bit difference in alignment. Okay, now we need to apply our 220 grit to the lapping tool. There is probably a lot better way than what I'm doing. Just taking my finger and rubbing it on there, but I'm supposed to put it on there generously. We'll want to label the front and back so we don't get them confused. So just a little piece of painter's tape and a magic marker. We will lightly attach the top ring so that it still moves, but it has some friction to it. And then as we go back and forth with the lapping tool, we'll need to tighten it down a little as we go. And what we're looking for is when we take the rings back off, we're looking for, say, about 75% of removing the paint from the ring. And let me say this, I didn't explain why is lapping needed. And let me get these on here, and we want to explain that to you, the sort of the engineering side of why lapping is required and why you should do it on your scope. The purpose for lapping the scope is so that you can have as much material. Let me show you here on the scope. So when we got the scope mounted on the gun, let's just say our scope ring was as wide as this little Allen wrench, and it went around, and that's what held your scope to the gun. Now, if the rings are not lapped properly and they are somewhat out of alignment, you may only have part of the ring touching here and part of the ring touching here. What we're trying to accomplish by lapping the rings is get as much area of the ring in contact with the scope. So as the temperature changes and you're firing the rifle and you're bumping it against trees, knocking it around as you're hunting, you want as much contact between the rings and the scope so that it stays in the exact same position. And that is the purpose for lapping. And so now let's get started with that and see how we go. See how she does. All right, I can tell already that I need a little more pressure on the rings. A little more. As the grip begins to move more symmetrically on the lapping tool, also you notice I placed tape around. I didn't want any of this grit getting down inside the rifle either, so I taped all my openings up, slightly tightening. You'll see it begins removing the finish off of the lapping tool. Okay, let's see how we've done. Okay, we're probably at 15%. Let me show you what you're gonna experience. This gives me an idea of sort of where we're at though. Okay, you notice the front ring there and the back ring. So we're just getting on the edge. So we're making good start, but we need 70 to 80% of that to be shiny like that. So let's put it on and go again. We have completed our scope lapping process. So now I want to show you the reason, the process, what it brings forth. So let's place our alignment tools back in our rings. From the overhead view, you remember what we had. Now look at that, that's awesome right there. Lapping the rings provides perfect alignment. Much more better contact between your rings and scope. Okay, we have the scope lap, the alignment pins look good. Now it's time to place our scope on, and we'll put them on there loosely to start with. We will apply a little bit of Loctite on these, but after that we'll adjust the scope back and forward to match for our eye relief. So I'm going to take a little of my blue Loctite, pour out. If you got a better way of putting Loctite on, please give me a comment below. There is a pattern, you go a sort of an X pattern on tightening these. I like to start them and just get them a little bit snug, and then go a couple of rounds apiece in the order given. Okay, have all my screws started through the top rings into the bottom, and Leupold gives a pattern there, if you can see, basically an X pattern, and what you're looking for is you want to keep the gap on each side of the rings consistent, so you sort of get them snug, and then just turn a few turns on each one in this crisscross pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, and get to 25 pounds of torque. But first we want to check our eye relief on our scope. So I'm going to take it out of the mount and just close my eyes, put my face to the stock, and open up and see if eye relief is good. I like mine shoved as far forward as I can on a high-powered rifle. Sort of small statue here, and I don't want the scope coming back and busting me in the eye. So I want to have to lean forward just a little to be able to see it. And I do this a couple of times, and I'm good. Okay, so we've got our eye relief fixed on our scope, and now we have to ensure that the scope is lined up vertically on top of the rifle. And how do you do that? Wheeler gives these little levels, and nothing wrong with this. It's just with this scope and this operation, this level won't fit in between the scope and the mount. I do have another one they send for this. This one's shaped a little different. So we get the gun tilted and leveled up. And then we place this one on the top turret. And now we tilt the scope and get it lined up. And this will be close, but we're going to use a different technique. We're going to go ahead and snug it down like this, but we're going to use a different technique. I have a vertical laser that I'll set up on the tripod. I'll come up the back of the stock, get the gun dead vertically level, and then that laser will go through the scope. It'll hit the crosshairs and come out on the wall, and I'll be able to adjust my scope to the vertical laser, making sure 100% it's correct. Okay, now that's done. We're going to snug it up, and I'm going to cut the camera off, line the laser up, and we'll see what we have. Okay, after leveling with the Wheeler, not throwing off on these little bubble levels, but they just don't have the degree of accuracy that I think you need on any kind of thoughts about long range shooting. So we're going to turn the camera around and show you our setup and what we use and why we use it. And love the Wheeler products. They're awesome, and they got us very close, but I just want to show you what this laser shows after you've leveled up with the little bubble levels. So what we have here is a Tacklife laser. You can get these on Amazon, and you'll see down here on the wall, let me zoom in for you. It gives a vertical and horizontal line. It's automatic leveling. It's just an awesome tool. It's been a while since I bought mine, maybe 65, 80 bucks, but anyway, I'll put a link on the video for what they are. So you set this thing up automatically, and you get it behind the gun, and what you want to do is you want to run this green line up the scope, down the center of the back piece, across the center of the bolt, and then to the scope there. See how this Leupold, it's got that mark there on the scope, dead center at the top, and we're across that. So we have the laser and the rifle lined up in the same plane. And now what we want to do is get the crosshairs in the same plane as the laser and the rifle. So now let's see if we can show you inside the scope what is happening. This gets tricky trying to see. At the top it's nearly touching, and at the bottom you have the gap. That's what we've got to twist the scope, so the scope is parallel with that line. It's very hard to video, but if you can see the top, how close it is to the edge of the crosshair, and then when you go down to the bottom it's further away, that means our scope is out of alignment, and we've got to fix that. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, let's try to video now that we've got it corrected. If we can get back in the scope here. It is just very hard to do with the camera. But if you can see how the line is perfectly lined up, and you'll get some parallax here. So understand it's not so perfect that the line be left and right dead on the crosshair. It's got to be parallel. The lines have to be parallel, and they are. So where this comes into play is in long range shooting. We tried to cover a lot of information in this video on how to mount your bases, rings, lap your scope rings, mount your scope, vertically align your scope. Sure, we made a lot of mistakes. We're not a gunsmith. We just a hunter that enjoys the outdoors. Chris Fowler Outdoors. If you have a comment on any of the things that we did, you liked or didn't like, probably at least need to comment on leaving the clip in during the video. So Chris Fowler Outdoors, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing.